All right, thank you so much. The program still this morning on ITV on independent television, where we're going to be looking at the Supreme Court's rulings on governorship appeal cases. And only yesterday, a total number of 5 states have been heard. I'm talking about their rulings, and we still have the Benue state that is still pending. And the most controversial of it all is the Imo State governorship election, whereby the Supreme Court had to, count down on Emeka Ihedioha, Chief Emeka Ihedioha, and pronounced Senator Hope Uzodimma to be the governor of Imo State. Well, this has elicited reactions from members of the public because for them such judgment is unprecedented. And of course, if you remember that the election was done sometime in March 9, 2019, when INEC told us that PDP scored a total number of 273,444. And of course, the Action Alliance, that's the AA, had a total vote of 190,364, while APGA had a total vote of 114,676. And Hope Uzodimma, that came fourth in that election, scored a total vote of 96,458. And of course, we had the YPP that got 527. Well, on Tuesday last week, the Supreme Court had to rule. On Friday, I beg your pardon, the Supreme Court had to rule that Chief Emeka Ihedioha is no more the governor of Imo State. Well, to look at the case of this morning, we are so proud to have pharmacist Uyi Oriahe, who is a political discussant, and we're expecting Comrade Mavis Enoma to join us on the program this morning. Sir, welcome to this program this morning on ITV.
Thank you, Albert. Happy New Year.
All right, thanks.
First time on the studio this year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Now, let's take an overview of the election, and the pronouncement as occasioned by the Supreme Court on the Imo State. Let's start from there. What's your general overview of that judgment?
When the judgment was read, I read about it in the news. I saw the news, the news line, like this news carrying it that Hope Uzodimma has been declared governor of Imo State. Well, it was a feeling of surprise, really surprised. How did it happen? Taking into cognizance the fact that he came fourth in that election. Yeah. I made a point of, looking into how the Supreme Court judges arrived at their decision. No, we are not lawyers, but we look at some of the things as spelled out by reports from you journalists and from other areas. Now, the truth of the matter is that they lashed on to certain lacuna that were hitherto ignored by the lower courts. Those votes that were counted in favor of Uzodimma were certain things the lower court had decided to overlook. But I don't know what the law actually says that made the Supreme Court to bring it up and decided that they must use these votes as, a determining factor in declaring who becomes the governor of Imo State eventually. But yesterday I tried to talk to a few persons, mentioned about 300-something units where elections were supposed to have been cancelled and those units were now counted. Somebody remembered that all these units were in the senatorial district of Mr. Hope Uzodimma.
About 388 units, to be precise now.
They were in the senatorial district of Mr. Uzodimma.
Yeah.
And they also drew my attention to the fact that that man had been a 2-time senator, representing that senatorial district. And by implication, that means he's popular around that area. So you will also look at it from the angle of how come 380-something polling units from an area where this man is very popular, cancelled.
Yeah, but I think the question we need to be asking is what led to the cancellation of those results from those units?
Oh, yes. It's the same question we're asking.
Yeah.
How come it was cancelled? What led to it? And how come those were the only areas where votes were cancelled? Well, that still does not make room for the kind of surprise we received when the Supreme Court judges made their pronouncement. It was really, really funny because the man came forth with 90-something thousand votes.
Yeah.
He overturned, I mean, a number of votes that amounted to about 270-something. It was funny, and we really need, I wish we could have a lawyer here telling us how these things could be, especially as it relates to the Electoral Act. You know, but again, my candid opinion is this. They lashed onto a lacuna.
Who now?
The Supreme Court judges. Okay. They dared to look at areas that the lower courts glossed over and attached no relevance and significance to it. But the Supreme Court lashed onto it. And I believe, according to the national chairman of the APC, that these results were also signed not just by the APC agents, but by the PDP and other party agents, you know, that they now relied on. You know, so that's why I said we need an expert view. Because when you also look at it, we cannot do a blanket thing and say, oh, this must be a particular party at its game again, looking to subvert justice and, you know, takes and go ahead to oppress the opposition. It could be that there are things in that judgment that made the Supreme Court come up with something like this. But I doubt very much if all went straight. But
Are you doubting the judgments?
in a way, I doubt the judgment.
Why? That's
Because I find it very, very funny that the number of votes called by Uzodimma who came forth could overhaul that of Ihedioha, who came first. There were two other candidates in between.
in between. We have Ifeanyi Ararome.
Yes.
And of course, we have Uche Wonsu, that was the second person in that election.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit funny. It's a little bit funny unless we take a critical look at this judgment line by line, word for word, as against the ex-ante rules. Then we can draw a conclusion as to whether this was really a manipulated judgment or not.
Okay. But you see, perhaps there are various ways to look at the Imo State governorship judgment by the Supreme Court. Now, one thing that people have tried to really want to question is the ability, for a candidate to subpoena somebody else to give evidence of the result that he tendered. Remember the 388 unit that he talked about? It was being reported that a certain policeman had to come up to give results for those 388 units, and of course, of which the Supreme Court had to readmit. Those were the results that were excluded before. Now, let's look at this idea that has to do with somebody can subpoena somebody else to, okay, you can go and tender a result. How is it from your own point of view?
I think subpoena is a process of law that mandates particular individuals to compulsorily come before a court of jurisdiction to give evidence. We all know that when we get to this point and the witness decides not to show up, I think it has a bearing on against him too. So he must come up. But it was all part of the political strategy of the Uzodimma camp to ensure that these evidences are put before the Supreme Court judge. But what I don't understand is this: whether the subpoena was for the was right from the
from those units,
were right from the High Court. I mean the Electoral Tribunal, because what you fail to tender at the lower court cannot be tendered at the Supreme Court. All what you have to fight the case must be tendered at the lowest court
before you take it to the Supreme Court.
So if he was subpoenaed at that level and he tendered that, and there were already existing evidences, and there were facts to show that they contained results, so to speak, of results that were signed by the various agents of the party, there could be a case for admitting it.
Yeah, at the point of the tribunal, the 388 units results were still excluded, and of course, at the point of the appeal courts, those results were still excluded. It was at the point of the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court readmitted those results. So just to give,
they were tendered. Only that they were not admitted.
No, they were that they were not admitted.
Yes, it's possible you tender
at the Supreme Court.
No. At the lower court,
okay.
It's possible you tender it,
okay,
and they are not admitted because the judges may look at it that look, the evidence surrounding this thing does not appeal to us. We cannot admit this. If I next say these results are cancelled, where did you get this one that you are bringing in? They may not admit it. So they tried the same stunt again in the appeal court and said, look, they did not admit this. They should admit this, because if they admit this, we will get to the fact of the matter. Okay, so the question we're asking, how come the Supreme Court now readmitted the already excluded results? They must have been backed, they must have looked at some lacuna in the law and admitted it, knowing very well that that could determine where the pendulum swings. Okay. You know, whether that is correct altogether, I cannot tell, because I'm not a lawyer. You're just looking at it politically. Yes, politically. So I believe that the Uzodimma camp did not just play a legal game. They played some political game. Okay. Now, would you want to say that there was really a gang-up? You know, a gang-up against Chief Emeka Ihedioha now by Senator Hope Uzodimma and Uche Wonsu, and of course the other man, Ifeanyi Aranrume. Now, remember that one stronghold from the Supreme Court is that these two other candidates can no longer count. Uche Wonsu, who what at a point was said that he was no longer a candidate. You know, at a point the party wrote that, look, we didn't take him to be a candidate. Then of course that was on one point. And also for Ifeanyi Aranrume, he was playing for a rerun. And of course the law says that you cannot ask for a rerun when already a winner was declared. That does not apply to governorship election. So when you put all this together, would you want to say that Hope Uzodimma, Ifeanyi Aranrume, and the AA candidates, Uche Wonsu, ganged up against Chief Emeka Ihedioha? It's very easy to reason that way, because what we saw play out were two individuals who should come out and hold their own in this very particular election ahead of Hope Uzodimma. They swept themselves out of the way and allow Uzodimma to. There was horse trading behind the scene, definitely. And it is something you cannot take away from politicians. It's something you can't take away from politicians, you know. And having made their case very, very solid, and they have understood how they could pass through, they have spoke to those two persons and said, look, calm down. In the weeks ahead, or the months ahead, we may begin to see the result of this horse trading that went on behind the scene. That's the politics of this country. Now, looking at this judgment and perhaps our constitution, would you want to say that our constitution is wholesome? This is not a problem of the constitution. This is a problem of interpretation of the law. And you see, what we are experiencing here, or what we have experienced, is something you also identify with all other sectors of our national life. A compromise, somehow. The tendency for compromise is high. You know, when it comes to legal cases like this involving, these are high-profile legal matters, involving electoral contestations, what you begin to see are politicians colluding to arrive at some predetermined ends. In fact, these people, they have a meeting point where they trash these issues out. These people, they have a way of circumventing the laws of our land by their big influence. When you say these people now, what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about the politicians? The politicians, the judges, the lawyers? The high and mighty. Let me tell you, my brother. Is that what you're saying? Let me tell you, my brother. It is difficult to begin to look at these judges and say, oh, these judges are terrible. They are under enormous influence. Now, when we begin to look at the electoral contestation, that very context, we begin to use that context to look at how our judiciary is playing out, we may not get this completely right. There are other aspects where the judiciary play a role, and you begin to see that the influence of these big and mighty people is so enormous that there has to be a rejig in some of the aspects of our law.
So are you saying that this judgment was influenced upon once again, I asked?
You can't rule that out. You cannot rule that out. But then there was a ground. They latched onto something. Because I look at the Sokoto state election. It would have been easier to dabble into that because the gap between the two candidates was so narrow. It was so narrow. And to find facts to overturn it or to order for a re-election or to give the victory to a particular candidate of choice from the ruling party at the national level would have been much easier with the Sokoto state. But somehow it did not go that way. It did not go that way. But in the case of Uzodinma and Ihedioha, it was a very far cry. You know, you could not even reason it that Uzodinma will be governor after what he has gone through prior to the election. What happened to him at the lower court and the appeal court. You will not even reason it. But something happened. There's high level. Is it our law that is a problem? It is not really our law. There is no constitution of any country that does not need amendments and re-amendments as time goes on. Because as we begin to move, the dynamics of our social and cultural existence begin to also play out. And we begin to make amendments to suit what's coming up. But at the end of the day, we have a law that we can stand on and still deliver good judgments. But here we are, the influence of the politician. It is not easy for these judges. It's not easy for these judges. That is the situation we find ourselves. But overall, I believe that judgment, under another circumstance, cannot stand the test of time.
With judgments?
The judgment of the Imo State.
Yeah, but already has been a winner has been pronounced, and of course a governor has been sworn in. When you say stand the test of time, are you saying that the judgment is going to be revisited?
In other climes.
In other climes?
In other climes, no, it will not stand the test of time.
Yeah, but you need to, because some people have actually argued that there seems not to be a precedent, to this Supreme Court's ruling. But legal luminaries are quick to point fingers at Chris Ngige and Peter Obi. Once upon a time, a similar case whereby the Independent National Electoral Commission ruled that Chris Ngige won the election, the Anambra State election. And of course, the case was taken to court, and Peter Obi had to subpoena somebody else to revalidate the result that he claims. And of course, the case went to court. The court looked at it one more time based on the evidence provided by the subpoenaing agents. And the court decided that Peter Obi won the election. Now, what I'm asking is that, was it possible that the lawyers of Chief Emeka Ihedioha did not see all this, that already we have a precedent, that when a candidate subpoenas somebody, that the person can give evidence and the evidence or the result can be taken? Was it possible?
They must have seen it. They must have seen it.
Why didn't they act upon that?
No. It is not the subpoena that is the problem. It's the weight of the evidence that is tendered. You can subpoena somebody to give evidence that even the judges will not find credible. But the weight of the evidence. What's contained in this? Even when their lawyers are aware of this and they begin to object to this, it does not stop the Supreme Court judges or the judges, for that matter, from wanting to admit them and look at the evidences. But if they also look at it and see that it doesn't hold water, it cannot be accepted. It cannot be used as a factor to determine the eventual outcome. But the weight of the evidence, the comment on the weight of the evidence is such that the tendered document that were also signed by the same PDP, by the APC, and the other parties who contested in the election. So the question we will also ask is, what did the umpires, what did they do? What was their role in all of this? Was there an attempt to cover up certain things? Because if you also see some of the results that went in favor of Ihedioha, you will see accreditation, of fewer persons than the number of the actual vote cast. 9,000 persons were accredited. You are getting 30,000 votes. It becomes an issue. And don't forget, when certain politicians, parties, when they know that you have strength in that area, what they do is to create chaos around that area so that a lot of people are disenfranchised. And the advantage you would have garnered in that place no longer exists. Now, 9,000 persons were registered. 30,000 voters
were gotten.
Yeah. Our votes were gotten. I think it's supposed to be, let us cancel the results in that polling unit or in that area. But now, the man who was subpoenaed to tender some evidence showed that, no, those were figures that were concocted. These were the actual things we got in that place. The Supreme Court judges may be forced to accept those evidence. The court will be forced to accept those evidences and look at them. If they are credible, they could employ them. Because at the end of the day, it is not just about doing justice. Justice must be seen to be done. But I don't know whether that is what happened in this case. I still doubt very much whether Hope Uzodimma possessed the credential by way of the electoral process to think of, I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer, but I find it a little bit out of place.
All right, the program is still this morning on ITV on independent television. We're looking at the Supreme Court's rulings on governorship appeal cases, and we still have one pending. The Benue State, 6 of them, and because 5 of them have gotten their determination of the cases, only 1 remaining. Well, just to get you, further informed, the Supreme Court recomputed excluded votes for Senator Hope Uzodimma, who came 4th in the March governorship election in Imo State, and this now made him to score the highest votes by having 1/4 votes in the 2/3 of 27 local government areas. Recall that the result that we got at that governorship election was PP had 273,404 votes, while AA got 190,364 votes. APGA scored 114,676 votes, and also we had the YPP candidates who got 527 votes, while Uzodimma of the APC got 96,458 votes. Now, let's look at the reactions, before we see other rulings on other governorship appeal cases, such as Bauchi State, Sokoto State, and all that. Now, INEC's reaction, I have to go through a reading of INEC. They say that they cannot do otherwise, because by law, it's a matter of constitution for them that they have to give weight to the judgment of the Supreme Court. And so that was why it has to give returning certificates to Hope Uzodimma. So how do you see all this?
INEC has said writing. That's the highest court in the land. They have given a judgment. Even Wike, the Rivers State governor, said he's disappointed with PDP officials, and PDP bigwigs who went to the streets of Abuja to protest against the
Supreme Court.
Yes, because they are asking the Supreme Court to reverse itself, which is an action which is unknown to our law, to reverse itself. The INEC at that point, irrespective of what it feels, must obey the law. If it does not obey the law, then it's asking for chaos and anarchy. It has to obey the law. It has to step out of the office. It's just the way it goes. And you remember very clearly in 2008 in this state when Governor Sumbo was governor for about 18 months, and the court declared Governor Shomole as the full now asset. And within minutes, things changed. And that's just the way it is. You cannot go further. That's why I call the Supreme Court. And the judgment is final.
Now, political analysts have actually called on Hope Uzodimma to ensure an all-inclusive government in most states, to make sure that he forms his cabinet based on the tendency to run across political divides in the state. But some of the moves that he took, immediately he was pronounced as the winner of the election, giving a directive that the accounts of states be frozen and no further withdrawals and all that. As a matter of fact, we were told that a lot of government officials were immediately sacked. Now, does that reflect a government that will give an all-inclusive governance in most states?
I think the answer is in the man we are talking about, Hope Uzodimma. We can't forget so easily what his ordeals have been. And he has some case to answer in court. You remember? What you don't have, you don't give. That is just this case. Asking him to run an all-inclusive government, that's a political language. It's not binding on him. And even if it is binding by law, at that point in time, the man can decide to jettison that aspect of law. But even now, it is not. It's just a political statement. It's a statement that will make. It's a win at all cost thing that we operate here. So he has started issuing directives that has no bearing with the smooth running of the state. In the interest of the people he has been enthroned to govern. It is not a question of power play. I have sought power. I have power. There are a few things I can do now that I couldn't do before. Now I'm doing them now. You know, here you have fell into the same bracket. You can see the mentality of our politicians. He started doing this hunting of culture, wanting to do that, wanting to do this. All of these things have no direct bearing on the welfare of the people that they were made to govern, even for that short period of time. Now, this man is continuing in that light. He's like a vendetta, wanting to unleash something, wanting to do this, wanting to do that. Those he fired, if you look critically, they may be those who he felt, who he got information were against him in the process. Now, that will make others to fall into line and, you know, dance according to the music he's playing. You know, so I don't expect much from them. I'm sorry to say this. Imo State has not been particularly lucky. Yes.
All right. Now, let's look at other cases that were determined by the Supreme Court. We have Kanu. We're told that Supreme Court upheld the election of Abdullahi Ganduje of Kanu State. That's the APC candidate. And the Supreme Court, you know, in a unanimous judgment by a 7-man panel led by the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Tanko Muhammad, you know, dismissed an appeal by the PDP candidate Abba Yusuf that there is no need to dislodge the judgment of the 2 lower courts. That's the appeal now, and of course the election tribunal in Kano State. And Ganduje upheld Ganduje as the winner of the election, and he said that the fact that PDP adduced was inconsistent with the sole ground of his appeal. That's the Chief Justice of Nigeria now ruling on Kano governorship election. How do you look at this judgment?
When our election was lost and won before the court started sitting, you know, there were certain things that, certain things that happened during that election when there was an overhaul from somewhere that gave the APC advantage over the PDP.
Yeah.
You know, that election was concocted to ensure that Ganduje returns. But it would have been better that Abbas, who the people actually voted for a mass, was governor before the court started sitting, because there was no way they were going to allow Kanu go to the opposition. You know what happened in Sokoto?
Who are you referring to now when you say there's no way they were going to allow Kanu? Because you talk as if these things are predetermined.
To a large extent, it's predetermined. It's even easier for them.
It's predetermined?
Oh yeah, to a large extent. Some of them are predetermined.
You mean our courts predetermine these cases?
Not our courts. It's not our
By
courts.
who?
It's not our court. They are powers. They are powers.
Who are those powers? Where are they?
The truth of the matter is that.
Pharmacist, the reason why I'm asking you this now, because usually cases are taken to court on the merits of evidence. I mean, cases are won in court on the merits of evidence. So when you say predetermined, it shows that our courts probably don't look at evidence. Is that what you're saying?
In the case of Ganduje, the evidences are not enough to remove Ganduje. The evidences have been so well cooked and streamlined to ensure that Ganduje cannot be removed. You can't blame the court.
Okay, so
what the court saw is what the court acted upon.
Yeah, you said predetermined, so that's why you have to.
No, it's not in the aspect of, not as it concerns the court now. During the elections, I mean, Abbas was leading with some margin. You remember? And certain areas were declared, certain polling units were elections were declared in certain units as inconclusive. Then they were. Voting took place afterwards to ensure that there was an overhaul that put Abbas as second. So that was where it happened. Now, it was predetermined in the sense that, having taken a look at how it is going to play out, the issue of inconclusive elections were concocted to gain advantage over Abbas of the PDP.
But were those elections recontested? Did people ever vote again after the election was declared inconclusive?
Well, you see, people
voted again.
People voted.
Yeah.
People voted, but the question in the game will now be, how many people will actually come out to vote? That's one.
But
Secondly,
but that doesn't negate the
no,
fact
it
that
doesn't.
people voted.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
How many people voted? That's one. Then, how was the voting conducted to give it a semblance of a free and fair, to create an atmosphere of a free and fair election? So there were a lot of people who would just say, why go there? We know exactly what's going to happen. But even this one I'm talking about cannot be tendered in the court of law. What the court of law knows is that what is recorded. Okay, now the elections were held. However, it was held. And declaration was made. Abbas lost out. So there is nothing Abbas could have done to have won that election in the court. And nobody can blame the Supreme Court judges for delivering this judgment. Abbas never won at any level. The Electoral Tribunal, the Appeal Court, and the Supreme Court. He never won. And there's nothing he would have done to win that election. That election was already won. As at the time some places were declared inconclusive. That's when it was won.
Okay, let's go to Plateau State now, where we're told that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Simon Lalong of the APC, and the Supreme Court held that the PDP candidate Jeremiah Oseni failed to prove the allegation of non-compliance with provision of the Electoral Act. So it's almost...
it's the same thing. What was Oseni looking for? Oseni wanted to be declared, or he wanted a rerun? Whichever, Oseni could not have gotten that election. These were elections that were well... they were well put together, votes that were well put together, and the structures and the people involved ensure that this is the result we want, and that's the result they got. It will even be easier for them when the two candidates are running head to head. They have their areas where they are popular. This was the relevant. They calculate the vote. They see that if you allow a free and fair election, this will be the outcome. Maybe we will just lose by a paltry 10%. This is easy to overturn. And they do all that they can to overturn these things. So, and cook the books very properly. That when you get to court, you are just wasting time. You are just wasting time.
Now, is it possible to want to reason that perhaps these candidates are really not that so serious? What I mean is that before taking a case to the Supreme Court, you must know that you should have evidence. Imagine what the Supreme Court came with in Plateau State as telling Jeremiah Oseni that he failed to prove the allegation of non-compliance with the provision of the Electoral Act. Now, Jeremiah Oseni at the time argued that the election was marred with irregularities in some units, in Plateau State. And of course, he called for cancellation because he was relying on the Electoral Act that states that on the accounts where elections are marred with irregularities, the best thing for INEC is to cancel the election. But here again at the Supreme Court, Jeremiah Oseni failed to prove all this at the Supreme Court. So was he just arguing for argument's sake?
No. There are factors involved, sir. How substantial is that area he was talking about in determining the overall outcome? That's one. Two, you have lawyers. Lawyers are gentlemen of the law who will always believe that so long as there is something to lay hold on, we can turn it. We can overturn it. In this country, it is almost always natural to contest an election. Election results. In court, almost always natural. It's only on few occasions that you have people not doing it, not necessarily because they didn't want to, but they must have looked at the financial implication of embarking on that, and they just withdraw. You understand? People like it. Now, let me tell you the thinking of some people. Sometimes after an election, the loser goes to court. He goes to court, not really because he feels he's going to win. They begin to do a search to see if there are extraneous evidences or issues that could be presented to remove the man who took first. For example, we have heard of cases where people are battling with fake forged results and all of that. So they believe that these things could happen. It could be a conviction. It could be anything. It has happened before. A sitting House of Assembly member in Edo State had to be removed for tax offenses. He was convicted on tax offenses. He was removed. So the man who was there, second, knew that he didn't have enough votes to go to that office. But because of what happened, he became a member of the House of Assembly. Now, that also happens. Some people have enough money to do whatever they want to do. They contest. And their lawyers also tell them, you can do this. There are ways we can overturn what has actually been declared. And they go about, we are not lawyers. Like I'm talking right here now, I keep remarking that I'm not a lawyer. But when they come here, they create avenues through which they can convince you that you can embark on this journey. And there are instances of people embarking on this journey and succeeding in the past. You know, because ideally, it is not every election that candidates who lost out should contest.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, let's see Sokoto State now, where Aminu Tambuwal of the PDP was said to have won the election by the Supreme Court. And of course, the Supreme Court ruled that Aminu Tambuwal won the APC candidate, Alhaji Ahmed Aliyu. And the Supreme Court also supported that APC failed to prove merit. In other words, the Supreme Court dismissed the case as lacking in merit. Still the same thing. At the point of showing evidence, evidence are not shown, evidence are not meritable, and of course the Supreme Court had to rule.
Yes, it's practically the same thing. You see, in Sokoto, we had an atmosphere of relative peace during that election. In Sokoto too, they play very, very matured politics. It was unthinkable that APC could lose that state at the time they did. But the very person of Aminu Tambuwal is not a man you could push and push away like that. Good enough, PDP also has a structure in that state. So Tambuwal is a figure that you cannot push away like this. He has been involved, and he's a man that has great followership. At the time, persons were projecting him to contest. I mean, he actually went through the nomination with Alhaji Atiku for the PDP presidential ticket. Okay, so it was also very, very interesting that the gap between him and the man who took second, the APC man, was about 300 and something votes. And I think it was enough. The judges cannot see anything there. They cannot have any reason not to declare him winner eventually. You see, sometimes when we talk about the judiciary in this part of the country, the only aspect where we begin to consider and assess the judiciary has to do with this issue of electoral contestation. And I do not think that's, I'm not comfortable with that. We begin to lambast and denigrate them. There's this tendency to lambast and denigrate them for making a particular decision and that we are not comfortable with. Now, apart from the Hopu Uzodinma matter, which cast a shadow somehow on their integrity in a way, look at all the other judgments that they gave. I don't think you can fault them. I don't think you can fault them, you know, in those judgments. So, whether they went for PDP or they went for APC is immaterial. You cannot fault their judgments.
So it's only for Imo State that seems...
Yes, and I don't think any bruha should greet that. They shouldn't greet that because, yes, you could x-ray what the judges did there. I have no question about that. I myself, I don't even totally agree that that is the way the judgment could go. But I'm a layman. But again, it is not enough to begin to look at our judiciary and say, oh, they have failed. They are doing their best. There are aspects where they need to really, really catch up.
But do you think that Alhaji Tambuwal Aminu, his political sagacity, his political substance may have also worked out for him in that election?
Definitely. I like that man. I have always liked him, even before the 2015 general elections. He's a man with great savvy. He's loyal to a cause, and he does not betray. You see, Aminu Tambuwal is a man that the PDP should really, really look onto for the future.
Maybe for 2023 presidential election.
Aminu Tambuwal is a man that they should really, really look forward to, because such men who still have age on their side and who have courted such political following over time are people you should not ignore. Sorry to digress a bit. The PDP, as far as I'm concerned in this country right now, is struggling. They need those shining lights to rally around for their future. Because we cannot afford to allow this country to become a one-party state. It is detrimental to our democratic progress. You know, we cannot allow it. There has to be forces here and there. Even though I am not an apologist of PDP, but they need to have structures on ground. They still need to go back. And people like Tambo are those they should just look forward to rally around in the future.
All right, for Bauchi State, we have that the Supreme Court upheld the election of Bala Mohammed of PDP and against Mohammed Abubakar, the former state governor of APC. And the Supreme Court dismissed the case as lacking in merit, just like in Sokoto and, of course, in Plateau State.
This is even the most interesting one. You remember during the presidential election that APC won that state for Buhari. And when it was time for the governorship election,
PDP won.
PDP won. And you can tell that bandwagon thing that we expect sometimes in our political system did not play out.
So what do you think the PDP did at the governorship election that they didn't do at the presidential election in Bauchi State?
It was not PDP that did anything. It was the people who made a choice. It's just like what you had in Edo. In the last legislative presidential election.
Yeah.
You saw a bandwagon effect. Even in my own constituency, a PDP candidate that did not as much as campaign had to benefit from the goodwill of people who at that time felt, no, we cannot vote a particular party. He won. He won. He wasn't the most hardworking on the field, but he won. This is what happened. No, they looked at the candidate. They threw their weight behind a particular candidate. Probably because of his antecedents, probably because they know him very well. And they gave him their votes. And that was it. And I always felt that there is no court that matter will go to that will not return the PDP candidate as the winner. Because the people voted their conscience. And the people won. We need to applaud the people of Bauchi for what they did in that election. Okay.
Now, the last one that is yet to be heard is for Benue State, where we have Samuel Otom of the PDP that is being contested by the APC man in Benue State. So, do you see the possibility?
Oh, that's another waste of time.
You see the possibility, waste of time?
It's like an academic exercise.
For the APC guy?
No, for the APC guy. Let me tell you, you know the issues that determine the election in that region. Just before the election, the Benue people were beginning to regret voting for APC because of what herdsmen and those activities that were going on around there. And the people were really agonized. They witnessed a lot of violent issues that caused them to regret voting the APC. And the governor danced to the gallery. He danced to the gallery. He was a member of that party. He came in under the platform of that party.
Of the APC?
Of the APC. Yeah. But when he saw that things were going the way they were at that point in time, he spoke out on the side of the people against his own party at the national level. That they are not doing enough to curb this spate of violence that's occurring in Benue. In fact, those were the issues that metamorphosed into his leaving that party and seeking a ticket of the PDP. The PDP gladly accepted him because they saw a political loophole through which they can grab that state again. Now, and successfully they did. They had enough reason to vote against APC in that state. And Otom again was the PDP candidate. He won. When an election is won fairly, it is difficult for any court to overturn.
But let's keep our fingers crossed. We cannot say that yet now because the result of the election is being contested at the Supreme Court. So we just hope that, well, I don't have my own say, but going by what you are saying, I think we really need to keep our fingers crossed.
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right, so that's the discussion segment on the program. A very big thank you to pharmacist Uyi for finding time to come on the program today. So let's keep our fingers crossed and see what the Supreme Court is going to say for Benue State. And it has been indefinite. That's the time that they gave now, so we don't know when precisely that they are going to give it to come at any time. Let's hope between now and say Friday we'll have the ruling of that case from Benue State. Well, we'll take a short pause now so that all that segment will come your way. Please stay tuned.